Hier heute am 1. Juni auch deswegen, weil übermorgen in Amerika der offizielle Prozess gegen Bradley Manning beginnt. Ein Prozess, in dem ihm unter anderem die Unterstützung des Feindes vorgeworfen wird. Eine Rede für Bradley Manning zu halten ist jetzt erstmal für mich nicht so leicht. Er hat ja in seinem eigenen Schuldeingeständnis schon sehr bewegende und klare Sachen gesagt. I want people to see the truth, because without information you cannot make informed decision as a public. Also eigentlich geht es hier ums Wesentliche. Frau Holland hat es in der Satzung des Chaos Computer Club auch 1986 so ein bisschen so ähnlich formuliert. Die Entwicklung zur Informationsgesellschaft erfordert Menschenrecht auf mindestens weltweite ungehinderte Kommunikation und grenzüberschreitende Informationsfreiheit. Und obwohl wir jetzt allmählich so eine weltweite vernetzte Realität haben, so ist doch Informationsfreiheit noch dabei, sich als primäres Instrument demokratischer Herrschaftssicherung zu etablieren. Die Kontrolle von Informationen, damit der Kampf gegen die Informationsfreiheit, ist sowas wie das primäre Herrschaftsinstrument von clandestinen, nationalen und supranationalen Regierungsorganisationen geworden, obwohl wir, wie gesagt, weltweite Vernetzung haben. Wenn man sich mal kurz das Kernprinzip der informationellen Kriegsführung anguckt, das lautet übrigens, wahr muss es sein. Also, das heißt, nicht lügen oder so etwas, sondern das gezielte Weglassen, das Steuern von Freigeben oder Nicht-Freigeben von Informationen, Täuschung durch Erzeugen von Scheinbildern. Das basiert genau darauf, auf Informationskontrolle, auf Geheimhaltung. Und Bradley Manning, dem jetzt vorgeworfen wird, durch die Weitergabe von als geheim eingestuften Informationen den Feind unterstützt zu haben, da müssen wir uns da fragen, ob wir nicht unser Selbstverständnis von Freund und Feind neu kalibrieren müssen. Also wie wir das eigentlich einordnen. WikiLeaks hat ja zunächst mal mit etablierten Medien zusammen veröffentlicht, die Materialien nach und nach auch im Internet zugänglich gemacht. Und trotzdem ist eben auch WikiLeaks und Julian Assange im Grunde genommen durch diese Secret Grand Jury auch in diesem Sog des Unterstützung von Feinden durch Veröffentlichung von geheimen Materialien. Das Prinzip von Demokratie kann aber nicht sein, zwischen Freunden und Feinden zu unterscheiden, sondern das Prinzip von Demokratie muss sein, Grundrechte zu haben, zum Beispiel auf das Recht, sich frei zu informieren und staatliches Handeln, die Transparenz staatlichen Handels auch einklagen zu können. Das sind elementare demokratische Elemente, die bei so einer Betrachtung von Feinden und Freunden vollkommen unter die Räder getrachten, die aber die US-Regierung hier beim Verfahren gegen Bradley Manning ansetzt. Da geht es ja scheinbar gar nicht mehr um Demokratie. Bradley Manning hat in einer Situation gehandelt, die man aus meiner Sicht durchaus vergleichen kann mit dem, was in Deutschland vor 70 Jahren passiert ist. Das ist schon vergleichsweise mutig, sich in so einer Situation dann dafür zu entscheiden, Materialien der Öffentlichkeit zugänglich zu machen, um so der Öffentlichkeit zu ermöglichen, Sachen zu beurteilen, zu bewerten und vielleicht doch so etwas Ähnliches wie demokratische Kontrolle zurückzugewinnen über die Prozesse. Aber wir leben offenbar in einer Zeit, wo nicht mehr das Aufdecken von Verbrechen belohnt wird, sondern bestraft wird. Und Bradley-Manning macht den Eindruck, die wollen ein Exempel an ihm statuieren. Für mich ist Bradley-Manning deswegen ein Symbol für Informationsfreiheit als eines der wesentlichen Elemente, wie so eine globale Informationsgesellschaft funktionieren kann. Glasnost, ich spreche jetzt ein bisschen auch in Richtung der US-Botschaft, Glasnost, also Transparenz, muss es auch in sogenannten demokratischen westlichen Ländern geben. Sonst ist Demokratie ja wertlos. Und dann können Bürger keine informierten Entscheidungen treffen, werden bloß zu so einer manövrierfähigen Masse im Spiel der Desinformation. Und insofern, well, tear the walls down of secrecy, Mr. President.
On Monday, when his trial finally begins, Bradley Manning will have been in detention for more than 1,000 days, including 11 months in solitary confinement. Manning's disclosures have brought desperately needed light to the people of the U.S. and around the world in their struggles for peace and justice. But the Obama administration has been unrelenting in its persecution of Bradley Manning. And starting on Monday, the administration's campaign against him will conclude with a probable judgment that will send him to prison for decades, if not for the rest of his life. To those who saw in the presidential candidacy of Barack Obama a hope for a turn towards peace and justice in U.S. politics, it is heartbreaking to realize that Obama and his regime have persecuted Bradley Manning for far more than, for example, the Nixon administration persecuted the whistleblower Daniel Ellsberg, who helped bring the Vietnam War to an end by leaking the Pentagon Papers in 1971. And where is John Kerry, Obama's new Secretary of State? When Kerry returned from military service in Vietnam, he became a member of Vietnam Veterans Against the War and helped to organize an historic hearing in 1971 called Winter Soldier, in which Vietnam War veterans testified firsthand about war crimes in which they had participated or that they had witnessed in Vietnam. That year, Kerry also testified as a war veteran before Congress and said that what most threatens the United States is the crimes that the U.S. government is committing. And he said, we have to speak out. Why does Kerry not speak out in support of Bradley Manning? Bradley Manning was willing to go to prison so that we could know the truth. As a heroic whistleblower, he stands on the shoulders of thousands and thousands of ordinary heroes of the GI movement, going back to the Vietnam War era and continuing to the present day, many of whom have also been willing to go to prison so that the truth about these wars can be known and so that these wars can be stopped. When Bradley Manning enlisted in the U.S. military in 2007, many GIs were already trying to tell the truth about U.S. war crimes in Iraq and Afghanistan. Some refused to redeployment to Iraq or Afghanistan, knowing they would be brought to trial when they would have at least some chance to tell what they had seen and experienced. One of the early GI whistleblowers was a soldier stationed in Darmstadt named Blake Lemoyne. I met Blake in 2005 when he was back in Darmstadt after his tour of duty in Iraq. He asked me to help him get access to the media to tell about the crimes he had seen. Like Bradley, Blake had entered the military with optimism and the idea that he would be doing some good. But on his first tour in Iraq, he was shocked at the cynical brutality and racism of the U.S. military towards the Iraqi people. Blake went on a one-man strike. He refused all duties, closed his bank account so the army could not pay him, went on a hunger strike so that the army could not feed him, and even proposed to live in his car so that the army could not house him. And what he said he most wanted was to tell about what he had seen to the media. Like Bradley, Blake was convinced that Americans would never support these war policies if they knew the truth. In 2008, anti-war veterans organized a new winter soldier hearing. 50 veterans told in excruciating detail about the crimes they had participated in or had witnessed in Iraq and Afghanistan. They told about the essential racism of these wars. Some showed videos they had shot of atrocities they had witnessed. They hoped that their compelling first-hand testimony would provoke a wide discussion of U.S. policies, but the mainstream media ignored the Winter Soldier hearing. A year and a half later, motivated by the same compelling desire to make the truth known, Bradley Manning approached the Washington Post and the New York Times, and he had far more evidence to show. 500,000 reports from the wars in Iraq and Afghanistan, more than 250,000 diplomatic cables from U.S. embassies around the world, and 779 documents pertaining to Guantanamo Bay, as well as a July 2007 video of a U.S. Apache helicopter attack on Iraqi civilians. But the Post and the Times ignored him. It was only because of the heroic and innovative work of WikiLeaks that this evidence has become publicly known. The Obama administration has tried to demonize and belittle Bradley Manning, to keep him isolated and wrapped in silence. His first chance to tell of his motivations was during the pre-trial hearing this past February. And journalists had to actually smuggle his testimony out of that hearing. In his pre-trial testimony, Bradley told how his mind had largely been made up by watching the secret video that would later be released under the title Collateral Murder. He said, the most alarming aspect of the video to me, however, was the seemingly delightful bloodlust the aerial weapons team seemed to have. They dehumanized the individuals they were engaging and seemed to not value human life and referred to them as, quote unquote, dead bastards, and congratulated each other on their ability to kill in large numbers. Seeing the videos, even some of the soldiers who had perpetrated the crime saw the truth of what they had done and apologized and expressed regret. The Obama regime, with its aggressive wars and targeted killings, perpetuates dehumanization and, at the same time, tries to silence the essential humanity of Bradley Manning. The trial, beginning on Monday, will be under a thick cloak of secrecy, monitored by military censors with no public access to court documents, and covered by a sparse and largely independent media. And Bradley's idealistic intent will not be taken into consideration in determining his guilt. Moreover, the important question of whether the documents he leaked should ever have been classified at all, or whether we, the people, instead have a right to know, will also not be discussed at trial. When Obama visits Berlin 3 weeks from now, we will surely find ways to let him know that the whole world is watching the Bradley Manning trial. We will insist that the trial transcripts be made public, and we will insist that Obama pardon Bradley Manning and set him free.
As a concerned U.S. citizen, to share some thoughts with you concerning America's most prominent political prisoner, Bradley Manning. Why do I say political prisoner? Because the nature of his acts were indeed political, and the government's aggressive and vindictive assault on Bradley Manning is also political in nature. A political prisoner acts according to his conscience, and to paraphrase the great Martin Luther King, he or she may willingly break the law and accept the penalty to arouse the conscience of the community over its injustice, and is in reality expressing the very highest respect for the law. I am here to tell you that a campaign of terror is being waged against free speech in my country, and the voice of truth tellers are being stifled, and they risk lifelong confinement, financial ruin, or potential death penalty for treason. Bradley Manning blew the whistle on the U.S. government and is one of those truth tellers. Today marks his 4 years in prison for the leak of 3 historic bodies, which exposed war crimes, abuse, and corruption. Whistleblowing is a safety valve in our society. It's the last instance, if you will, for issues that need correction and cannot be managed in conventional ways. Whistleblowers have played a very important role in our history as a corrective instance for malfeasance. President Obama, we need to protect whistleblowers. Bradley Manning testified and said that his conscience had led him to make the disclosures because it is public data and it belongs in the public domain. Those are the words of a true prisoner of conscience. Amnesty International and Human Rights Watch are refusing to acknowledge him as such. Amnesty International says it has to confirm whether the information was disclosed in a responsible manner. Since when does Amnesty International have to arbitrate on the ethics of information disclosure? I would like you to ask them, and please contact your local chapter and ask them to declare him a prisoner of conscience that he is. It could be a life-saving measure since he is being charged for aiding the enemy or having committed an act of treason. This all comes at a time when we are witnessing an unprecedented attack on the freedom of the press, where any leaks of classified information to any media organization could potentially be interpreted as an act of treason and be charged under the Espionage Act. President Barack Obama and Attorney General Eric Holder have used the Espionage Act 6 times to prosecute whistleblowers, more than all the previous presidents combined. Bradley Manning's case is also directly related to the Department of Justice's unprecedented invasion of journalists' privacy and the right to protect the sources. Journalists, their sources, and publishers are now equally under attack, with unconstitutional dragnet surveillance of journalists, such as in the case of the Associated Press, which revealed that the Justice Department had secretly obtained 2 months of telephone records of 20 reporters and editors, and the case of the Fox News chief Washington correspondent James Rosen, where his private mails and phone calls were monitored, and he also faces charges for conspiracy for allegedly receiving classified information from a source about North Korea. I would like to quote the legendary Pentagon Papers lawyer James C. Goodale. The press has a First Amendment right to publish information that is significant to the people's understanding of government policy. And what we are currently experiencing is a relentless war on whistleblowers, journalists, and information activists. And this war poses the gravest threat to our fundamental democratic principles. Bradley Manning did just that. He disclosed information that is significant to the people's understanding of government policy. Here is a quote from Bradley Manning's pretrial statement in February. I believe that if the general public, especially the American public, had access to the information, it could spark a domestic debate on the role of the military and of our foreign policy in general. Now that we find ourselves embroiled in a perpetual war for many years to come, with the so-called global war on terror, the legality and morality of these missions are rarely discussed in the media. Manning spoke truth to power and challenged the government's determination to prosecute and to control the information to conceal criminal acts and war crimes. Bradley Manning knowingly violated the law in order to expose greater criminality, as Rosa Parks did in a monumental act of civil disobedience that changed the course of history. Or Daniel Ellsberg when he released the Pentagon Papers. These people are true patriots. They're heroes. They're not criminals or traitors. As citizens, we have an obligation to expose war crimes and acts of misconduct and corruption. It is our obligation to expose injustice to the powers that be in a representative democracy. There is a de facto chilling effect now being felt in the free press in light of the series of cases which criminalize dissent, disclosure, news gathering, and publishing. Our very civil liberties are at risk. That is why Bradley Manning's trial is of such seminal importance. And yet the media, and by the extension, the US public, has been banned from witnessing the legal proceedings brought against Bradley Manning. And to quote Julian Assange, "Justice must be seen to be served." Secret trials are very commonplace in dictatorships and have no place in this country. The recent Justice Department actions against journalists and media outlets and the secrecy surrounding the trial of Bradley Manning sends an ominous message about how far the state is willing to go to prevent oversight of its actions. Amy Goodman said, "Access to court documents and proceedings in the court-martial of Bradley Manning is vital to the public's right to know to what lengths their government will go to keep secret their conduct of wars and their occupations abroad." One of the three enemies that Bradley Manning is accused of aiding is classified, the other two being Al-Qaeda and Al-Qaeda in the Arabian Peninsula. Multiple scholars have said that they have never seen a case involving a classified enemy. If Bradley Manning is found guilty of having aided the enemy, it will set a very dangerous precedent. And here I would like to quote Julian Assange again. "If that precedent is allowed to be erected, it will do two things. Firstly, it means it's a potential death penalty to any person in the military speaking to a journalist about sensitive matter. Secondly, it also embroils the journalist and the publication in that chain of communicating, they would say, to the enemy, and therefore making them susceptible as well to the Espionage Act." Bradley Manning and the recent cases against the information activist Jeremy Hammond are amongst the highest profile in a series of cases that the Obama administration has been pursuing against information disclosure. What do Hammond and Manning have in common? They both disclosed information to WikiLeaks, and they did what they thought was morally necessary in the face of terrible injustices being committed. Truth is not a crime. Whistleblowing is not a crime. Denial crimes is not a crime. I say Bradley Manning has done us a great service to his country and to the rest of the world by exposing the true costs of war, and that means the costs of the lives of the millions of innocent civilians in Iraq, Afghanistan, Yemen, Somalia, and the thousands of deaths of US service personnel, as well as the 50,000 suicides of American military personnel. I invite you to take action, get involved, contact your local lawmakers and your newspapers and your congresspeople. Tell your government that Bradley Manning has served enough time, and tell them that truth-telling is not a crime. And I'd like to remind you that you cannot trust your news outlets if they are not reporting about this trial. Write your local media and demand insightful journalism. Free Bradley Manning, free Jeremy Hammond, free Julian Assange, free John Kiriakou, free Barrett Brown, free Anakata, and free Mumia. Thank you very much.